How did you get on, Herr Morgan?
Called in on the smallholder, Roble. Didn't even speak English.
Good, very good.
My pleasure.
Well, if it's pleasure you're after, there is one other. This farmer preacher fellow I met in Valentine, Mr. Downs.
The opinionated little do-gooder? Yeah, I know the one. I certainly know the type.
Thank you, Herr Morgan.
There's no need to thank me. Like you said, it's pleasure I'm after.
He's more slippery than he seems. I've tried being polite. Don't take any nonsense.
Nonsense? Me?
If he doesn't have the money, beat him.
Leopold Strauss is one of the few characters that, at first glance, really is not all that significant. His tie into the main story is basically just sending Arthur to collect money from a dead man that, in a twist of fate, ended up signing Arthur's own death sentence. Strauss is also injured during the first direct encounter with Leviticus Cornwall, which resulted in a gunfight involving Dutch, Arthur, John, and a wailing Strauss, pitted against the entire town of Valentine. But that's basically it. That's all that he's used for as far as the main story is concerned. Besides these small moments, he is mostly resigned to the background of the game, enlisting Arthur to go out and collect the debts from the various people foolish and unfortunate enough to have no choice but to accept the harsh money lending terms that Strauss puts them at the mercy of. And in this context, technically, Strauss is one of the more active members of the gang. He is practically the gang's official bookkeeper after all. We cannot deny he's doing his best and trying to carry at least his own weight, yet in a paradox, because the way he goes about it is completely different from other characters that prefer a more direct approach, such as robbing and killing outright, a method that Dutch and Arthur seem to both agree is somehow more dignified than Strauss's preferred method.
I'm going to head into the local town and, see if I can strike up a little business.
Of course, Herr Strauss. I prefer robbing banks to usury. Seems more dignified somehow.
All the other members look at Strauss as someone that's slimy, a snake that can't be trusted, which is an interesting look because if money is really all the gang is concerned about, Strauss does his due diligence at acquiring just that, and he wastes no time in trying to acquire that. This is apparent through the cutscene where as soon as the gang sets up in Horseshoe Overlook, before the first tent is even set up, Strauss is already starting to head into town to find people to loan shark money to.
It's legal work, Mr. Morgan. Debtors belong in prison. We are doing them a favor.
Alright, I'll make sure they see it in them terms.
In a previous video, I touched on the tragedy of the Downs family, and how Thomas's wife Edith found herself working in the streets, potentially contracting syphilis as a result of this line of work she's found herself in, and her son Archie was forced to work down in the mines of Annisburg, a victim of the harshest punishment at the hands of the foreman who does not like Archie. Now, the overall premise of that video was questioning if Arthur was the one to blame for the situation that the Downs family specifically found themselves in, and it's that inspired this video, because no, technically, it was not Arthur's fault, at least not directly. Arthur was nothing more than the executioner. His job was not to think about why any of these people accepted their terms or why they haven't paid yet. All he was concerned with was having to receive a debt from people who, in Arthur's eyes, possibly looked at the gang as a source of a free handout, a group that could be taken advantage of, and when it was time to pay, to just run off. If you look at the money lending missions, they serve a few purposes. On the one hand, they are tied to Arthur's own ethics. All of the money lending missions up until he is sick, we see him being incredibly threatening. There's no option to negotiate or hope he'll hear any of these people out. It was their decision to take Strauss's offer. They're late on their payment to something they agreed to, and now they have no choice but to give any and everything they have, or suffer the consequences of whatever Arthur sees fit. This is something Rockstar even sneakily plays into. You see, the first few debtors we have to chase after play into our own frustration and dislike towards them. Chick Matthews tries to play Arthur for a fool, and attempts to run off while being a bit too happy to tell Arthur to fuck off. It's his money now. Roble doesn't speak any English, something Arthur's further annoyed with. It's also made worse when you realize you see this bastard in the epilogue and he actually does speak English.
Cortez, have you seen him?
He's in the barn.
Did I tell you? It's the barn.
Bastard's been here for days. Do your worst to him.
Lily Millet, I guess, is a little bit different from the rest of them as she demands the guy she's with to pay the debt since he did take all of her money, but he refuses and a fight breaks out. 3 debtors that all give Arthur trouble. No one pays outright. I mean, the later debtors don't either, but with these three, it looks as if the gang is just being used as charity, and Arthur takes the role of the errand boy, going to collect. When you throw Thomas Downs into the mix, now it just looks as if Strauss is irresponsible, giving money to whoever is foolish enough to think they can either pull a fast one on Strauss, or people so desperate enough to accidentally think the amount Strauss gives is enough to provide some type of financial cushion, an angle Thomas possibly thought. But it's not until the second round of debtors where we get a closer look at the dealings Strauss really gets into. Unfortunately, we never know what Strauss's exact terms are. We do not know if he changes the amount given or the time frame provided to these clients, adjusting them accordingly to sucker them into just agreeing. The bottom line is getting them to take the money. But what we do know is Strauss does not discriminate against who he lends to and under what conditions the loan is expected to be repaid in. We know this through at least Winton Holmes, a refinery worker turned hunter. When Arthur finds him, he's out in the wilderness, sleeping by a campfire. Holmes expresses payment to the gang wasn't guaranteed, and Strauss knew that. He was aware Winton had no job. He had few opportunities and was betting on hunting this rare snow white cougar to both make up his own fortune and repay the gang.
Hey, you knew it was a risk.
I didn't know nothing. Your name's all I knew.
Well, the German-speaking fella then, Mr. Strauss, he knew my work situation was precarious, that this whole thing was a risky venture.
Wait, risky? Am I at risk now? Are you threatening me, Winton Holmes?
I ain't. No, certainly not. Sir, I'm merely stating, a man without a job, with limited prospects, at those rates, repayment was by no means guaranteed. I said I'd do my best, and I did.
He says himself the rates Strauss provided, and knowing the position Holmes was in, Strauss knew loaning him any amount of money was possibly a waste. Holmes would end up dead trying to kill this cougar, which ultimately happened, or it was just another money pit. Throwing money at this poor fool in a transaction where the only thing really guaranteed was a visit from Arthur, so long as Holmes still had a pulse, that is. Gwen Hughes, an undertaker apprentice, resorts straight up to grave robbing just to give the gang what he owes them. Not exactly as insightful as the encounter with Holmes, but it does show that these group of people are willing to die or disgrace the legacy of the dead in order to get Arthur off of their backs. All of the later debtors have what appears to be equally as dangerous and unstable sources of income, if they have any at all. But what they all do have is a massive amount of collateral. L.G. Davison is a drunk, and it looks like he's so far into his own vices, his son had no choice but to hide his own little bit of money from his father, out of fear of him possibly spending it on more liquor. And this is money Arthur promptly takes, after most likely killing his father, who tries to catch him off guard and ambushed Arthur with a knife.
Friends, come and take what you owe.
Cut your damn head clean off!
But really, just looking at him, what could Strauss possibly see in gaining from him? Or what of J. John Weathers, a deserter from the military? In the middle of coming to collect his debt, Arthur has to help him fight off some US soldiers, after which Arthur discovers Weathers has a wife, who's not only from the Wapiti tribe, a tribe of Native Americans that are in the middle of growing hostilities with the US military, which possibly led to Weathers' direct desertion, but she's pregnant as well. Weathers is in a position where he has a pregnant wife, where he has to take care of her, while constantly looking over his shoulder of any possibility of randomly being recognized out in public as being wanted for desertion, or even in this instance being located by a dispatch of troops coming to take him in, as if that wasn't an easy enough position to be put in to find a job or even get a solid foundation for a new start for his family somewhere else. Add in the debt he owes Strauss, who would be sending someone like Arthur to come and collect, and what's really to gain here? Then of course the last one is Arthur Londonderry, who literally worked himself to the grave to repay all of his debts. Now I heard somewhere that Londonderry collected other debts outside of the Vanderlyn gangs to repay Strauss, because Strauss's terms was the most egregious, and Londonderry was afraid of what would happen. However, I can't find anything supporting this. What I think is more likely was Strauss sent other members of the gang, such as Bill or Javier. I doubt it was Micah, because Micah I think would be equally or more ruthless than Arthur, and Strauss specifically says who he sends lacks Arthur's vigor or power of persuasion.
Family man, desperate, you know the type.
Couldn't one of the boys do
I
this?
tried. They lacked your vigor.
Vigor, huh?
But even Londonderry had a family. He had a house, he had a wife and son, and his debt was so high he couldn't afford not only to repay the gang, but even to keep his house. An echo of the position of the Downs family. This is the final straw for Arthur. Realizing the position Londonderry left his family in, you can choose to absolve the debt and even give them some money. But whatever your decision is with the family, Arthur will return to camp and ban Strauss for all of the families he's destroyed. All the families Arthur's played a role in tormenting. Families that were destroyed doing work Strauss considered legal.
What?
Get up!
What is wrong?
Nothing's wrong. Nothing at all.
What are you doing?
Something I should have done a long time ago. Get your bag. Is this it?
I don't understand.
I ain't gonna kill you, though I probably should. You disgust me. And you shame us. If we could be shamed any more than we already are, that should do. Go!
I don't understand you. What are you doing?
Go and get a job!
You know, they say the sick delude themselves. I was your friend.
You and me, we ain't decent. But those folk, they was. Now here, take that. Take that and get lost.
I'm
Leaving.
In his own way, Strauss caused much more harm than any other Vanderlyn members. He's indirectly to blame for what happens to Arthur. He's preyed on people in weak, vulnerable, desperate positions, and he's exactly what honestly Dutch and the rest of the gang seems to hate so much. If this was truly legal work, which I'm not going to go into the laws of 1899 or the ethics of loan sharking, but just hearing Dutch's stance on this type of work and on Strauss,
Nothing like talking to old Strauss to make you want to blow your own brains out. I should have left him where I found him all those years ago. Bookish little Austrian, fresh off the boat, his eyes out on stalks.
Well,
you have to imagine Strauss's line of work and the legalities of it has to play more into Dutch's own hatred to the growing modernity of civilization. Strauss's own character, oddly enough, shows the boundaries of the other Vanderlyn gang members. Perhaps because Dutch's philosophy has taken such a deep-rooted seat into their own reasons as to why they do what they do. Sure, they may be robbing and killing, but it's painted in a way that is somehow justifiable. They are glorious outlaws, after all, fighting to be free, and they only take from those who can afford it. People who won't even miss what's taken, like Leviticus Cornwall. They don't take advantage of poor, beaten, desperate people for anyone to give them a dime only to show back up a few days later expecting $1 in return. Strauss in many ways was actually the direct contradiction of Dutch's Robin Hood facade. Maybe you turned a blind eye to it because even though he didn't like or agree with it, Strauss was still a valuable asset at the end of the day.
sharking already.
I prefer to call it banking.
You ain't the one handing out the beatings.
No, but I am the one feeding the women and children in the camp. What choice do we have, Mr. Morgan?
I don't know. Well, come on then. Tell me who.
Here's the list. Refinery worker turned hunter by the name of Vinton Holmes. You'll find him up in the hills north of Strawberry. Ah, an apprentice undertaker. This one working in Rose. His name was Gwen Hughes.
And how many of them do you think will be able to pay?
With enough encouragement, both of them.
That's gonna do it for Leopold Strauss, the monster. Let me know what you guys think. If there's anything else you want to add to this or any other characters you want me to do next or relationships or anything else like that. And if you stood this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, as there's Red Dead content coming out somewhat consistently along with more Red Dead content, because that's all I'm basically doing these days. Like always, my name is Cynic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.